Welcome to Cosi Talks. All right, we are live. I'm trying a few new things with a new camera today, so hopefully the resolution will be a little bit better than in previous shows. So we'll get started with a cheers and a toast to you, my viewers. Thank you for being here. Oh yeah, it's been a Diet Coke kind of day when you need a Diet Coke at the end of the day, right? All right, guys. So for those of you who are watching the replay, I really love the fact that many of you are typing replay into the comments, that you're putting your questions in there. I do go back and I see, watch the show and I look for extra questions and comments. So for those of you watching the replay, go ahead, put those questions in there, hit the replay, give me a shout out. I always love to know who watches afterwards. And also on another side note, guys, Facebook loves to change the algorithms all the time for those of us who have business pages on Facebook. So it would really help a sister out if you could share this video to either your pages or your support group pages. It would be very, very much appreciated. So if you could do that, that would really help out a lot. All right, we got Alberi. Buenas noches, Alberi. Thank you for coming. We got Compadre on board. What's up, Frank? You beat Lena here, man. All right, you're on the ball. So I'm going to give you guys another couple minutes to jump on board. We want to get a good group going. We've got Lori here. Hey, me too, man. We've got a lot of good questions, guys. I have to admit, like, I love doing this show. It's Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. For the past 4 years, I've been doing this show faithfully. And I won't lie, man, as a mother of 4, I am so exhausted by 8 p.m. on a regular weekday. But Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. rolls around, and all of a sudden I've got a little more pep in my step because I really, really love doing this show. What's up, Damon? Damon, we have got to do our next run together. We are overdue, man. We are overdue. What's up, Liz? And we've got Chuck is here on board. We've got 2 Liz's. We've got Liz Shea from New York, and we've got our Liz from California. We got Ashley from, there's my Tennessee teacher. How's that first week of school treating you, Ashley? Hope you got your ice sweet tea there. All right, guys. So, and I lost my train of thought. Chuck says, hey, Cosi, looking forward to the great information. Thank you. And guys, I've got to say, so I was talking about how much I love doing this show. So I have to admit, I love having my special guests on this show. Next week, we're going to have targeted muscle reinnervation, TMR nerve on the show with Dr. Margaret Roubeau. She's a plastic surgeon who specializes in oncology-related amputations. So she is wealth of knowledge. She's going to be on the show next week. But I got to tell you guys, my favorite shows are the ones like I'm going to do tonight, where you guys sent me lots of questions and you tagged me in the support groups for questions that people were asking. Love it when you do that. Okay, that's the whole purpose of this show, is to answer the questions that you have. So don't be shy about emailing me. In fact, I'm going to put my email there. There's my email. If you have a question, email it to me. Yes? Awesome. Or as many of you have been doing, you tag me in your Facebook support groups when either you have a question or you see someone who has a question that you think I can answer for them. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You made this physical therapist very happy this evening. Ashley says, we are in week 2 and I am extra exhausted since I am still out of my prosthetic. I am crutching it at school. Yeah, that's going to be exhausting. We've got Jill in Berkeley and we've got David in Newberry, South Carolina with his cherry Coke. Cheers to you, David. All right, we've got a great group on board. One for the road. All right, we're going to get started. For those of you who are joining me for the first time this evening, welcome. My name is Cosi Belloso. I am a physical therapist, amputee specialist here in Tampa, Florida. I'm the proud owner of Palanca, an outpatient amputee physical therapy clinic, and the host of Cosi Talks. So we're going to get started. Pastor David, there you are. We've got Felicia on board. Thank you for joining in this evening. So guys, last week we had a great show, right? Click Medical was on board. They were talking a lot about the RevoFit, their adjustable socket system, and also the well, you can't see in there because I've got some stuff in there, and the Revo Lock, which is their locking suspension system. And so many of you submitted really wonderful questions. If you are still having questions about this, guys, don't be shy. Email me. I am happy to answer these questions. And if it means having to repeat things over and over and over again, I will totally do it. Sometimes some of these suspension systems versus adjustable systems, it can get a little bit confusing, okay? For those of you who are on my email list, can I make a shameless plug now? Let me just do that now. If you go to my website, you can sign up for my email list, okay? I promise I don't send a ton of emails. Okay. Once a week at most, I'll send once a week. But in those emails, I put like all the good information so that you just have one place to go to. Okay. So if you haven't signed up for my email list, go ahead and sign up for it now. Okay. And you'll get all the latest on all the stuff that I've been referencing. How do you change prosthetists? Jill has got me right out the door. Jill, how do you change prosthetists? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about that, guys. And then my microphone's all tangled up. Okay. So, question some people might have is, well, why would you want to change your prosthetist? When do you know it's time to change prosthetists? Okay. And this can be a little bit of a tricky question, but we've talked a lot about this on the show, and I think it's important for people to understand. You're not married to your prosthetist. Okay. Oftentimes, when amputees are in the hospital and they've just had their surgery, there's a lot of times where a prosthetist may come to the floor and visit with you and introduce themselves to you. And I think that's wonderful. I think it's good to see a face, and I think it's good to start that process as early as possible. Okay. But you are not required to continue with that particular prosthetist. You're not even required, okay, to go to the prosthetist that your surgeon sends you to. Okay. Now, is it a good place to start? Yes, of course. But much the same way that you would interview many people for one job position, you do the same thing with your prosthetist. If you click right away with your prosthetist and you get a good feeling and you have a good rapport with that prosthetist, and that prosthetist takes the time to explain things to you, answer your questions, then great. If you got it right the first time, awesome, move on. Okay. But there are times where sometimes a person will meet with a prosthetist and for whatever reason, things don't jive. Either you might not feel comfortable with that clinician, or you feel like the person may not be answering your questions. And guys, this applies to PTs as well. I'm tough on my own profession as well. Okay. And it's okay to look around. The prosthetist, the physical therapist, these are clinicians that are going to be a part of your life for the rest of your life. Okay. So you need to have the right one on board. Okay. And I don't know, some of you recall the show with Ronnie Dixon. Ronnie Dixon is one of the sponsors of my show this year. Phenomenal prosthetist. He's out in Tennessee with POA Tennessee, Prosthetic Orthotics and Associates. He is an amputee himself, and he became an amputee at a very young age, around 17 or 18 years of age, right? And even he will say, the first couple of prosthetists that he had were good people, and they were good prosthetists, but they just weren't making the right fit leg for him. And they went back to the drawing board on several occasions, right? But they just couldn't get the right fit. And he had to try a couple of different prosthetists before he made his dream soulmate in prosthetists. Okay. And this has happened a lot, to many of you on the show. Okay. So when it comes to you think you might need another prosthetist, things aren't working out, I always recommend start out with getting a second opinion. Okay. And that's exactly what that is. You call up a prosthetist that you think you might be interested in seeing and just make an initial consultation appointment and have them give you an honest opinion about the current prosthesis that you're in. And one of two things is going to happen. Either A, the second opinion prosthetist is going to tell you that your leg is actually pretty good and that your current prosthetist is on the right track and that you just need to keep working on it. Or the second opinion prosthetist will tell you, yeah, I don't think this is the right direction. This is what I can offer to you. Okay. And you go from there. And then after that, if you do decide to make that change with prosthetists, your new prosthetist should be helping you facilitate that change in terms of exchange of medical records and talking to your insurance company. Okay. It's not always the most pleasant thing to do when you have to say goodbye to one prosthetist or a clinician because it's not working out. But guys, as clinicians, we understand this. The good clinicians, we understand this. We understand that we are not going to be a perfect fit for every human on the planet. Okay. And if your clinician is a good clinician, they will want you to be paired with the best clinician for you. Okay. So just keep that in mind. All right, let me read here. We got a few more comments coming in here. Woohoo. Denise, what's going on? Denise from North Carolina. There's my Tar Heel girl. There's comadre. Mark says, there's the Bob family. Yes. And Mark, that's the one that you sent me. So guys, a little history here on my Bobs. So this is Bob. He is my reluctant, sometimes snarky model for the show. And when I first started doing the show, probably, it was probably 6 months into the show, right? I was trying to demonstrate something, and my kid had put together one of those toy skeleton models. It was actually a really nice one. So I just grabbed it and I said, okay, this is Bob, my model, right? And it just kind of stuck. And over the years, you guys have sent me Bobs, and I love it. So there's this Bob that you sent. There's that big old one back there. And I had one of my Canadian viewers actually send me Fred, so that Bob could have a pet. So that's the history. For those of you who are watching the show for the first time, wondering why I have a bunch of skeletons, it's not because they didn't fit in my closet. I've got those tucked away in a different closet. It's just all the wonderful ones that my viewers have sent me over the years. All right, Steven says, just ask my prosthetist about the Revolock. He said they don't do many and they didn't work out well. So again, Steven, when it comes to things and products that I feature on the show, okay, it's you encourage you, if this is something that you're still interested in, prosthetist, okay, what is it about it that you felt that didn't work? Okay, and is it something that we can talk to one of the representatives, or perhaps do we need to consider a different suspension system? Again, the whole point is stimulating conversation. And guys, I will be the first one to tell you there is no one thing in amputee world with regards to products that will work for everyone. There isn't. So I'm glad that you're having these conversations, and it could be that something is just not appropriate for you and for your fit, and that's fine. Thankfully, you have a lot of options nowadays on the market. All right, let's keep moving on. Hey there's my Marianne from South Dakota. Jill says, do I let the prosthetist make the bad leg and then take it to a new person? How does insurance work? Okay, so Jill, this is where I'm going to tell you a lot of like, okay, because when it comes to insurance, I am not an expert. I'll just put that right out there right now. I can tell you what I've heard some viewers had happen. So recently I had a viewer who emailed me because they were asking for recommendations for prosthetists in Central Florida, which is where I am, because they realized they had to leave the prosthetist that had made a very poor leg. And he had apparently already signed off on the leg. The viewer didn't realize that in signing that paper, that means that the leg is now completely his, and the prosthetist basically could wash their hands of the situation. And, he didn't realize this because it wasn't really explained clearly to him. Okay. And that's another sign that the prosthetist you have may not be the bright fit if they're not explaining things very clearly to you. So it was the debate of, well, I don't want my insurance being charged for this poorly made leg that is causing my skin to break down, right? But I technically signed for it. So I encouraged my viewer to go back to that prosthetist clinic and to talk to the management and just explain the situation to see what the options were. And the particular clinic was very, they came to a compromise where they kept the bad leg, and his insurance was not charged for it, which quite honestly, if the leg was making his skin break down, he shouldn't have had it anyways, right? And then he was able to start with the new prosthetist, and the new prosthetist filed for the making of a new leg. Okay. But again, folks, this is where I tell you every state is different, right? Every insurance is different, and every individual case is different. Okay. So, if you are thinking of changing prosthetists, the new prosthetist should be kind of walking you through that process and telling you what your options might be, okay? Whether your insurance will fork over the money for a new socket, new leg, or if there's going to be a waiting period. Again, this is something that you need to talk to your new prosthetist about, because that might make a factor into your decision making. I hope that makes sense, Jill. Saludo. We've got Cuba watching the show tonight. All right. Saludo, Jackie. ¿Cómo está, prima? All right. Let's see. Tom says, I'm watching in my truck tonight on my way home from Ottawa. Don't worry. My wife, Bonnie, is driving. Good to know, Tom. Thank you for clearing. Hey, Gustavo. Hola desde Argentina. So, guys, I just wanted to kind of share something. For those of you who are just new to the show, Spanish is actually my first language. I am of Cuban descent. And, having the show available to the US community and the English speaking community and globally has been wonderful. And lately, I've been kind of trying to reach a little bit more of my Spanish speaking community. So, we have a couple of folks here on board tonight that are primarily Spanish speakers. So you might hear me translating some of the questions and answers for this evening. And if you do happen to know people that are primarily Spanish speaking and they could use a hand with some of their questions, please feel free to give them my information. I always love to try to have everybody included in the conversation. All right. Didn't know you guys probably didn't realize you were going to get a little Spanish lesson tonight, huh? Okay. So Steven says, I've been at my prosthetist for 6 months and we've been having one problem or another with different sockets. So going back to this, guys, and this is something, again, if you haven't watched my show with Ronnie Dixon, I love working with Ronnie. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. He's like me. We have very small filters, so we just tell it like it is. So if you want to watch that show, we did that show back in January, and he talked about how to go about choosing a prosthetist and what to look for. And Stephen, one of the things that we covered in that show is that oftentimes, you are having to go back to the drawing board a lot to get the right fit for the socket. Okay. And you can have some of the best prosthetists, but if you have a tricky fit, and there's a lot of people out there with having tricky fits, right? It might require multiple times to try and get it there. So how do you know if your prosthetist is getting anywhere or not? Number one, the fact that they want to keep trying. Unfortunately, and it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. You might hear of a prosthetist that says, okay, you come in for your fitting, we'll check it once, maybe twice, and now we're going to go into your final socket and off you go. That's kind of a red flag for me. Another red flag for me, if it's a prosthetist that does not allow you to take home your check socket. And I know I might upset some clinicians when I say that, but I really believe that needs to happen. So when you're in the process of making a socket, especially if you are a tricky fit, meaning you've been having trouble getting a comfortable fit, making a check socket and reinforcing it on the bottom, right, with the casting material so that you can take it home and try it out in your daily life, I think is incredibly important. And for those of you who are lucky enough to be working with a physical therapist, I love it when my patients bring in their check sockets and we get to work it and put it through the gauntlet because, man, we will find every little thing during the treatment that needs to be adjusted. And that's the time to make these adjustments, right? So, Stephen, if you're having these issues going back for 6 months, it doesn't get my heart rate up just yet. What I would like to know is what kind of problems are you having with your socket? So if you don't mind putting that into the comments section. Johnny says, I told my previous prosthetist that I needed to grow by educating myself, working with another clinician. Yes. And guys, there's several graceful ways. I've been PT now for almost 20 years. I've been in healthcare for over 25 years. And there's been the occasional patient that we just don't jive. It's okay. As a human being, yeah, it stings a little bit, but as a clinician, I realize I am not going to be everybody's cup of tea as a clinician. And if I'm truly vested in the best interest of that patient, then I want them to have the best clinician. In some cases, it might mean a personality conflict, right? In other cases, and sometimes for me, if there's something going on with my patient that I simply don't have the experience to treat, then I put my ego to one side and I will refer that patient to a colleague that has that kind of experience. So with prosthetists, and I've seen this done before, if you have a prosthetist that perhaps is not familiar with a particular strategy, a particular technique, a particular socket, but they can refer you to one of their colleagues that is much more experienced, or they can collaborate. You know what I mean? So I'm just kind of putting these things out there. Hey, what's up, Keith? Man, I haven't seen you here on the show in a while. You cheers to your beer, and I got my Diet Coke. All right, here we go. Okay, so Gustavo asks, and I'll say it in Spanish and then I'll translate it in English. ¿Podrías hablar sobre la transpiración del muñón dentro del socket? Usar antitranspirante en aerosol? So what he's asking is, how do we let me get my mind working. How do we deal with sweat on the residual limb while using the socket? Do we use an antiperspirant? Okay, so some of you who, I'm going to answer it in Spanish and then I'll answer it in English. So, Gustavo, yo tengo unos productos aquí que me encantan usar esta compañía. Y cuando recibí su pregunta, llamé a la compañía. Desafortunadamente, esta compañía no puede mandar las cosas internacionales porque es mucho dinero. Son unos productos fabulosos que me encanta usar. So, lo que puedes hacer es, el antiperspirante sí se puede usar, pero la persona lo tiene que hacer por la noche. So, por ejemplo, cuando la persona se baña por la noche, se pone el antiperspirante en la piel para que se la absorbe en la piel, para que por la mañana, cuando se ponga la cuenca, no se le vaya a resbalar la cuenca. All right, so I'm going to translate it in English. So guys, as a lot of you may know, I absolutely love using VitalFit products. Unfortunately, they do not ship internationally to Argentina to this gentleman for his patient. So my recommendation is what I used to do in the old days when I didn't know about VitalFit. Sometimes, yes, I did use an antiperspirant on my patients. So the trick with using antiperspirant, and usually I like clear and dry is kind of the popular one, is that the person has to take their bath the night before, and then they have to put the antiperspirant on the night before. And this allows it to soak in, especially if you're living in a country or a part of the United States that's hot and humid like Florida. Okay, so I got away from using a lot of these over-the-counter products because they were not made to be worn with a liner and with a socket. Okay, so for me, like I said, guys, these products by VitalFit are amazing because they were designed to be used with your liner and with your socket. But unfortunately, like I said, they're not available for international shipping just yet, so got to make do with those over-the-counter products. Yeah? Hey, Bill, glad you could make it. Let's see. Leslie, thank you for reminding me. Okay, so guys, I will say this. Many of you emailed me questions, and my document where I had all the questions saved got lost. It just one of those computer glitches. So I was hoping tonight that I was able to recover most of my questions. Leslie, can you please post your question into the comment section right now? Because I knew I was missing one or two people and I couldn't come up with who it was. So thank you so much for reminding me. Can you please put that into the comment section? Thank you, Leslie. Thank you. Let's see. Johnny says change can be challenging, but it may turn out to be favorable if you're willing to take a chance. Absolutely. Let's see. Kay says, hey, Cosi, finally back in Alaska. You are my globetrotter, young lady. You've been to Israel. You've been all over the place. Hey, Harsh. All right. So Thomas says, call your insurance company and be your own advocate. You are paying for insurance. Make them work for you. Thomas, I like how you roll, man. And he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right, guys. Like I said, I am not the expert when it comes to insurance company, but Lord knows, even in my own personal life, I've had to get on that phone and duke it out with a lot of people on the 1-800 number in my insurance card. Okay, so yes, I would say have the communication between your new prosthetist and the insurance company. And I'm going to actually throw out another one of my secret weapons. Her name is Julie Conley. And many of you have heard me. So she has been on my show on more than one occasion. Okay. And she is an absolute angel. So I have used Julie a lot for reference for folks who have had denials by their insurance company for devices. And she is a wonderful resource for how to submit for reapproval for some of these devices. And I've had several success stories from local patients and from some of you as my viewers who have used her and have had her as a consultant on your cases. So that's another secret weapon that you want to kind of tuck into your back pocket right there. So write her name down and write down her address, ampuup.org. All right, hang on. You guys are getting some great questions here. Hey there, Alex from you're in St. Pete tonight, Alex. All right. So Mark says, when I asked my prosthetist why they didn't let me take the test socket home, she told me it's not as strong as the final. And yes, you're absolutely right. Okay. The check socket, it's exactly that. It's just meant to be a demo socket. Okay. But and this is something that when I was an early younger therapist, I was very shy about this because I was just like, well, I really like it when my patients bring the check socket in, but this prosthetist says he doesn't want to let the patient have it and take it home because it's not strong enough. Right? Until I had several prosthetists that I love to work with, and they just basically looked at me and said, look, we're going to put casting material around the bottom of that. And as long as the patient is not doing jumping jacks and cartwheels, and they're just doing reasonable amounts of mobility, okay, to test the socket out, then we're going to let them take it home. Okay. So this is one of those sticking points that, again, to my prosthetists out there that I'm rubbing the wrong way with saying this, sorry, not sorry. But yeah, I do think that you should be able to take a check socket home with reasonable action. Okay. Again, you're not going to go out there and try to run on your check socket or jumping jacks or cartwheels or anything crazy. It's basically just to wear it throughout the day, just moving about your home, taking it to your physical therapy appointment, and just kind of putting it through the moves just to see. Because as you guys know, as you go throughout your day, your residual limb accommodates into that socket a little bit differently, a little bit better, right? So that's how you're going to find out. Okay. The other side, and I've seen this done as well, and I agree with this technique. There are some prosthetists that they say, you know, we don't want to let you out of the clinic with the check socket, but we are willing to allow you to be in the clinic for several hours and trial it out. I think that's a very fair compromise. So I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to get myself into trouble one of these days. All right, let's see what else we got. Hey, Pat. Oh, thank you, Pat. So Pat says, happy to share your Above the Knee Strong Body book with my new prosthetist. He seems very impressed. Well, thank you so much. And you just gave me a wonderful chance for a plug there, Pat. So guys, if you guys haven't already seen it, I do have 2 books, one for above the knee amputees, one for below the knee amputees. There's a combined total of over 150 exercises between those 2 books. And we are actually going to be looking at the video program a little bit later on, as I'm going to be sharing with you one of the exercises for that program. All right, so there's the website for that, for those of you who haven't had a chance to see it yet. All right, sorry guys, I am working through. Okay, so Danny says he uses the nursing pads to absorb any extra sweat on his residual limb. Okay, so Gustavo, my Spanish speaker physical therapist from Argentina, is saying, actualmente estamos usando con ella un 3R60 de Autobac para pasarla a la Genium X3. Ok, fabuloso. Me encanta lo de la rodilla mecánica porque eso va a permitir que si ella quiere aprender a correr, eso es una rodilla muy apropiada para correr en un futuro, y que también ella va a aprender un control muy bueno con la rodilla mecánica. O sea que cuando se traspase a la rodilla computarizada, okay, va a tener que aprender la técnica un poco distinto, porque cuando mete el talón en el piso va a poder doblar la rodilla un poco, okay, pero va a poder progresar muy bien. Okay, so now in English. The physical therapist here from Argentina was commenting on how his patient is starting off with a 3R60, a young lady by Autobach, and they're eventually going to pass her to the Genium X3. And guys, you see this a lot. So recently I was in Guatemala, okay, working with Range of Motion Project, and there was a lot of use of the mechanical knees there. And my colleague, she is a physical therapist in Mexico. She says that, again, very rarely do they see microprocessor knees. They just see a lot more of the mechanical knees. It's more of what's available in their countries. So in this particular case, this young lady is going to be able to get a Genium X3, which is wonderful. But I also think it's great that she has learned how to use the Autobach 3R60. It's a fantastic mechanical knee. It's a wonderful way also, eventually, if she wants to run. I believe I always forget the initials mixed up. And for the young people, I think it's a great way to really learn control of the knee when they can start with the mechanical knee and then eventually move to the microprocessor knee. And the Genium X3 is a wonderful knee. Okay, Leslie, your question. No, Leslie, I am not an amputee myself. No, I am a physical therapist and I have over 19 years experience working with amputees, but no, I am not an amputee myself. And Leslie says, I'm a left above the knee, 3 years out. I'm having skin issues with my liner. Yes, Leslie, I remember now. Thank you. I've been back in my chair for 5 months. I switched liners. I break out in a rash, hives, and sometimes blisters. I have switched liners. I'm careful with what I wash them. I rinse them very well. I got a new knee, a genium. Ooh, nice one. And I was so excited. I thought I'll wear my liner for short periods and build up. And after an hour and a half, I was itching. I had a big red patch on my skin after I took it off. And I've been to the allergy doctor, dermo doctor, and wound clinic. I'm going back to the allergist for a patch test and then call Oser with what I found out. The allergist wanted to know what made up the liner, but Oser couldn't give out that information except for mostly silicone. Okay, so Leslie, you have given me a lot of very good, very valuable information. And Leslie, I actually did, if you can send me an email, and I promise you I will be able to answer for sure. I did a wonderful show with one of my local dermatologists that I love working with. So that's a really great skincare show, and we talk about allergies on the show. So your liners, okay, basic liners on the market are made up of three things: silicone, gel, or a polyurethane. Okay. And of course, you're going to have the different companies with their proprietary blends, right? So, companies might be a little bit reluctant to release the ingredients, which I find it a little bit interesting that they didn't want to tell you about it. But okay, we're going to move on. So yes, primarily the liners that you're going to use they're going to have silicone. Typically, silicone does not cause allergic reactions, typically, okay? In fact, that's why we use it. So long time ago, I used to do a lot of work in the burn trauma clinic, and we would use silicone patches on the burns for patients to help flatten out their burn scars. I'm not sure if that technique is still used anymore, but we would apply the silicone directly onto the healed burn grafts. And the reason why we could do that was because it was not causing any kind of sensitivity reactions on our burn patients on their grafts. Okay. So you don't often hear about silicone allergy or reaction on the skin. That being said, right, there are exceptions to every rule. So you're doing exactly what I would have recommended. You're seeking out the dermatologist and more specifically the allergist. Okay. If you're one of the rare people that has an allergy to silicone, then, obviously you want to know about it. I would be curious, Leslie, if you had this reaction with a gel liner. Okay, because you mentioned that you switched liners. So I'd be curious if you used a gel liner at any point. They tend to have a bit of a more cushy feel. Okay. And I know, for example, with folks who have sensitive skin in the sense that they are more prone to blistering, their skin is sensitive. So with the shearing forces, they're more prone to blistering. The custom polyurethane liners tend to be a little bit more friendly. But when it comes to the allergy standpoint, I don't know as much. And again, this is something your allergist will be able to guide you. But at least you can kind of give them that information. Your three basic materials, the three different kinds of liners on the market is you're going to see gel liner, silicone liner, and the polyurethane liner. Okay. So yes, I'm glad that you went back, because if you had told me you hadn't been to the dermatologist, I would tell you that's the first person you need to check up on, guys. Okay. So when I hear, and I'll tell you guys just kind of the umbrella of it. When you have symptoms of itchiness or patchy or red, it could be something as simple as a heat rash from the sweat inside the liner. It could be a fungal infection. It could be the beginnings of a bacterial infection. It could be a little bit of both. Okay. And if it's your first time as an amputee experiencing some sort of skin issue, and at some point in your life as an amputee, you're going to have a skin issue, you always want to identify it correctly the first time. Okay. So I tell folks, if it's something new that's on your skin you've never seen before, and it's not clearing up by just leaving it open to air and having it clean, go see the dermatologist and see what they tell you. Okay. You cannot treat a fungal infection the way you treat a bacterial infection. And if you do, you might make it worse. Right. So Leslie, you're doing everything correctly. And I think it's a matter of finding out what it is that's causing that sensitivity reaction and then staying away from it. Yeah. But I'd love if you kept me posted on that. Yes, Danny, we're going to get to that right now. You are right there. Okay. Okay. So this next question, here we go. So this was one of the questions that I got tagged on in Facebook. on the Facebook support groups. This gentleman says, I am a right above the knee amputee. Is pain and discomfort in my left hip normal and part of my body adjusting to the changes? And then he goes on to ask, what kind of stretches can I do to get in shape? Okay. So the gentleman has, the amputation on one side and isn't above the knee, and then he's having pain in the opposite side, in the sound side. Okay. So first of all, let me just say, when you have pain in your body, it is your body doing one of two things. It's either A, healing from a trauma. So if you have surgery, you're going to have inflammation from surgery and you're going to have pain from surgery. But that's part of the healing process. Or it's pain, meaning something ain't right. Okay, it's your body trying to tell you something. And the older I get and the more aches and pains that I get in my own body, the more I've learned to listen to my body and not try to push through it. Now, it's not to say that I get, my heart rate up over every little hangnail, but it's something that it's worth considering. Okay. So if a patient comes into me and they say, I just started using this prosthesis and my left hip is starting to hurt, probably one of the first things that's going to pop into my mind is, are you overworking that hip? Okay. It's your sound side. All right. So it's going to be natural to favor it more. Okay. So are you overworking it? Let's start looking to see if you're putting, how much weight are you putting into your socket, into your prosthesis? Okay. And if I see that there's an obvious deficit or an obvious asymmetry, I'll do a few more special tests, physical therapy tests, just to kind of rule certain things out. But that's pretty much going to be a big culprit right there to start out with, right? That you're overusing that sound leg. And as for my above the knee amputees, you're going to be more vulnerable to that, okay? Because you have less leg to work with in the residual limb, okay? So are you overusing it when you're walking? When you go from sit to stand, are you doing it completely on your sound leg and not using your prosthetic side at all? That's a big one among my above the knee amputees, right? Are there strength deficits in those hip and those pelvic muscles, which we talk about a lot, right? So you're not getting that support, you're not getting that power, muscles are getting tired, and the joint is having to take more of the brunt force. Is there an asymmetry in the alignment? So that's probably one of the first things I also check. I check to see, is the height of the prosthesis the same as the height of the sound leg? Okay. So these are a lot of things that I'll start going through, to try to determine. Okay. Now, are there some aches and pains and discomforts here and there that you'll have, and just keep asking the patient as they come in? And if they don't have that pain again, okay, it was just one of those, like, well, your body was just getting used to it and it seemed like you work it out. But if it's a pain that someone says, it's been there, it comes and goes, it's nagging me, then we start to look into it. Okay. And, Danny and Tim, this is something that this is where I really advocate for having that physical therapist on board. Okay. And it was funny. I kind of put a smarty pants reel about a week and a half back about my thoughts on people who said they don't need a physical therapist if they're an amputee. And it was a really interesting response to that reel. But guys, it's true. I think not just amputees, I think anybody who decides that they want to live a long life should have the services of a physical therapist for when they need it. Okay. Our bodies are aging, and as our bodies age and we are able to live longer and longer into our 8th, 9th, sometimes even 10th decades, things start to break down. Okay. And much like a car, can you keep a car running even though things are kind of falling apart here and there? Yes, but eventually it's going to catch up to you. So, your body is a lot like a car. If you just kind of take it to that mechanic who takes good care of it and you just address the issues as they start to pop up, then you're going to have a very nicely running car for a very, very long time. Okay. So when it comes to these pains on the left side, okay, these are, and even on the other side, it can have the pain in the amputated side on that hip as well, guys. It's something that warrants being addressed by the physical therapist because they can pinpoint what is the cause of the pain. Okay. And when you can pinpoint the cause of the pain, then you can treat it accurately. Okay. So this same gentleman also asked, what kind of stretches can I do to get in shape? So my response to that is, when you're having pain in the side, just trying to do stretches is kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. Okay. So again, could it be that this gentleman's left hip pain is a result of hip flexor tightness? Sure, absolutely. But we don't know that. And that's something that, again, go back to your physical therapist and get that evaluation. And here's a caveat on that, guys. When it comes to diagnosing left hip pain or assessing left hip pain, your physical therapist does not have to be an amputee specialist because this is the bread and butter of our profession, right? We are experts on the analysis of gait patterns, and we are also experts on disorders of the musculoskeletal system. Joint pain. Okay. So even if the physical therapist that you are seeing has never worked with an amputee before, they're going to be able to assess your pain and see where it's coming from. Capiche? Okay. Sorry, reading through some of these questions. Okay, so Steven, it sounds like they have been trying at your particular prosthetist that they are trying a couple of different suspension systems to see what will be the best fit for you. So I like the fact that they are trying a couple of different things. So Kimberly says she's wearing a check socket right now, switching from a pin lock to suction, and I'll have it for 2 weeks. Good. So Leslie says, I have tried several liners and I itch really bad. My allergist said he could test me for 80 chemicals. Oser wouldn't tell me what the liner is made out of for him to test me. I broke out with the willow wood as well. I wash liners every day and rinse them well, and I gave up and have been in a chair for 2 years, but I want to walk again. So like I said, Leslie, it sounds like you have addressed all the list of things that I would typically tell folks about: the rinsing of the liner, the keeping it clean, making sure you rinse, and trying a different brand name of liner just to see if it's a different, formula. But Leslie, just for, if you're able to do this, if you can get me the name of the Willowwood liner that you tried, I'd be curious to see if it was a gel liner or if it was a silicone liner. But again, the allergist is the one who's going to be able to help you out with this, because if they can pinpoint what it is that's causing you to have that kind of an allergic reaction, I think you'll get some progress there. David says, I've already passed over the trouble line. I know I've probably gotten myself into trouble a lot, but that's all right. Let's see. Tom says, I broke my very first check socket the first day home with it. They fixed it, reinforced it, and then I was good to go, but I still managed to break things. Tom, with as active as you are, that doesn't surprise me. And I'm probably, like I said, I'm probably getting myself into trouble with this whole check socket business. But again, guys, it's also, and Tom, I'm not singling you out. I'm just teasing you. It's just using your common sense, guys. And, you have a check socket, walking up and down the hallway of your house, walking throughout your house, going to your physical therapy appointment to try out the socket. That's what I would call reasonable activity level to do with a check socket. And it's not just about the walking. It's, okay, how is my limb changing throughout the day? And is it still comfortable at the end of the day as it was at the beginning of the day? Do I have to add an inordinate amount of socks, or, what's the deal? How is my limb changing through the day? And if my socket is keeping up with those kind of changes. Yeah. Gustavo, mucho gusto. Gracias. Gracias por el piropo, Gustavo. Mucho gusto. Gracias. Let's see. Marianne says, I have an incredible dry spot on the side of my bone on my leg. I've been using but it is so dry the skin is sloughing off. Any other suggestions? Because I get sore so easily. Reminds me of my grandmother's psoriasis. Ooh, ding, 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 Marianne. Again, this is another one. I'm having a lot of dermatology questions tonight. So Marianne, it might warrant, if you have a family history of psoriasis, because that runs in families, it might warrant going to the dermatologist and asking them about that. Because yes, if you have something like psoriasis, the Vital Fit products are not meant to treat that. Okay. Do I have some patients of mine that have psoriasis and they use the moisturizer on that psoriasis and it works? Yes, but I have to say that is not what it was designed for. Okay. So if you do suspect that you might have psoriasis, Marianne, and it could very well be that you do, a little patch, it's certainly kind of fit in that, especially with a family history, then definitely get to the dermatologist and have them just treat that area. A lot of times, if it's just a very mild case, they can spot treat it with a little hydrocortisone cream and you're good to go. But that's something you want the dermatologist to try and tell you about. Okay, so Kimberly says, Leslie, I almost always get a contact dermatitis skin rash when I switch to a new liner. Luckily, it usually clears up. I get a new liner and had no reaction. I think it's called Winter's Gel. See, and I'm not sure why. And it's a very comfortable liner though. So that's, Leslie, now we're kind of getting somewhere. Now we got some ideas going on. So it's typically, like I said, people don't react to silicone typically, but it does happen. So again, I'm curious, Leslie, if you've ever tried a gel liner. So Leslie, your homework assignment is to keep me on track and email me, Leslie. Email me the exact name, if you can remember it, of the Willowwood liner that you tried, and also the name of the Oster liner that you tried. And I'd be curious to see if either of those were, well, we said the Oster was silicone. I'd be curious to see if the Willowwood one was a gel liner. Gracias, Gustavo. Actually, Gustavo, si usted me puede mandar preguntas específicas, yo puedo hacer videos cortos en español y empezar a hacerlo. Pero si a mi email me puedes mandar preguntas específicas y lo voy a empezar a hacer en español. So guys, this was the Argentinian physical therapist that he just asked if I have videos in Spanish. So I just asked him to please send me very specific questions and I will start putting out some videos in Spanish. So guys, for those of you who are my Spanish speakers or who know Spanish speakers, keep your eyes peeled. I think I'll start putting some of those videos out on my YouTube. Okay, so Mark, okay, that's a good question, Mark. How about using a liner under the actual liner? Okay, so here are my thoughts on the liner. I know many of you have used the liner. It's like, it's really called that, liner. It's a very thin little sheath that people put on their skin underneath their liners, right? I've got mixed emotions about it. I have some people who say that they use it, it helps with their sweat, and they have no problems. And to those people, I say, vaya con Dios, awesome, wonderful, okay? But a lot of people, when they use the liner, sometimes it actually causes friction, okay? Because it's something that's in between your liner and your skin. So the potential to cause friction and blistering is there, okay? And then also it does have the silver in there. So again, Mark, somebody who's having a sensitivity reaction, that's where I defer to the dermatologist completely, okay? Someone who has a sensitivity reaction, I'm not anxious to start putting stuff on there to test out what might or might not work. It's let's identify what is it that's causing that sensitivity so that we can avoid it. I take my skin seriously. Let's see. Denise says, how is it going with the suction? I'll be going down the same road soon. My biggest fear is that the socket will come off. And guys, that's a very common fear and it's totally understandable. You know, a lot of times people will start off with a pin or a locking suspension system specifically because they want that comfort of knowing that when they click into that socket, they are in that socket, okay? But with the suction systems, and again, you can do this with a sleeve that goes over the entire socket. You can do it with the little button that you push as you go down to create that negative pressure in the socket. These things are really snug. Okay, so these sockets, when they're built with the suction systems, I love suction suspension for my patients because when the socket is made comfortably, it's a wonderful system and it really feels very connected with the leg. So Denise, I believe you have a very good prosthetist. So I think that when you switch to that suction system coming off of pin lock, you're going to feel a lot more connected to your socket and you're going to have a better sense of proprioception. Okay. And also you're going to be reducing the chances of any pistoning that might be going on. Okay. Sorry, guys. You guys got a lot of great questions today. Okay. So Kay says mine had silver in it and I was allergic to the silver. So again, yeah, when I see someone who's having sensitivity reactions, that's where I say that's above my pay grade and I send them off to the allergist. And, let them figure out what's going on. Mhm. So, okay, talking about the suction and the different systems here. So Kimberly says, there is a valve and a sleeve. So even if I lose some suction, the sleeve holds it on and it's so much more comfortable. And that is something that a lot of patients will do, especially for my below the knee amputees, that they have the valve for the suction and then they choose to have the sleeve that goes over everything. And again, a lot of it is in the skill of the prosthetist. This is where the prosthetists really shine with their artistry, because I think it's artistry and science as well. To make a very snug, comfortable fitting socket. So if all of that is fit, the socket shape and design is done well, then the suction that is created in there in that socket just helps really suspend it even better. Okay. I think, hang on, guys. Oh, here was one. Okay. Oh, here's a good question. So Folkert sent me this question and he asks, please hold it. There is nothing better than a really fizzy Diet Coke. Simple pleasures in life, guys. Okay. So Folkert asked, my prosthetic has been in the process of getting fixed, and as a right above the knee amputee, I have been using a wheelchair to get around. I like the safety and stability a lot more. And now there might be issues of all sorts from being in a chair a lot, using the other leg as a propeller at times, as well as the arms and using it as a brake. Okay. So what are the thoughts on that? Okay. So when it comes to setting goals for my patients, it kind of goes back just a little bit there. One of the first things I like to determine is if my patient is going to be, a full-time ambulator or a part-time ambulator. Okay, so in the first 1 or 2 sessions, I can usually make that determination. Okay. For the most part, unless the individual had a very complicated medical condition history, or if they are 90 years or older. And I've had some 90-year-olds who have done remarkably well. Usually I try to make sure that a person becomes a functional ambulator, meaning that they're using their leg for most of the day. Okay. And again, guys, this isn't a value judgment. This is clinical reasoning. Okay. Our bodies were meant to be bipedal, meaning we were meant to walk on 2 legs for most of our day. That's how our bodies were designed, right? So, and the world that we live in is meant for getting along on 2 feet, right? So if I have an individual that I feel like can be a functional ambulator using their prosthesis, that's the goal I'm going to encourage. Okay. And again, the patient has a lot of say in this. Okay. Many times I've very rarely heard a person say, I don't want to be able to walk again on my prosthesis. I don't think I've really ever had anybody say that. What I hear sometimes is, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of falling. I don't think I can do it. Okay. And those are all things that as a clinician, it's part of my job to coach them through that and answer their questions, especially if I do feel that they have the potential to become functional ambulators. Okay. So when I see someone who, like this gentleman here who says, I've been using my wheelchair because my prosthesis has been in the shop and I feel like I'm getting along really well in my wheelchair because it's easier. Okay. It's a very careful conversation I'd want to have with that individual and just say, okay, what are your goals? What is it that you would like to be able to do with your life? You know, and is it something that we can do to help maximize those goals with more mobility? Okay. Now, there are some cases, for example, my bilateral above the knee amputees, that many of them will say it is simply too energy consuming for me to be walking on two prosthetic legs for most of the day. And using a wheelchair allows me more independence in my community, in which case I say, okay, so let's see how we can maximize your potential with your mobility using your wheelchair. Is this making sense, guys? Okay. So again, it's a very individual case. I did have one individual. Unfortunately, he ended up passing away. He had a lot of health conditions, and he recently passed away. And he had been in a wheelchair since his amputation for 5 years because he had never received physical therapy, and he was an above the knee amputee. So in his case, because he had spent so long in the wheelchair and his health and medical condition had been deteriorating, okay, in his case, his wheelchair gave him greater independence, greater mobility. However, he wanted to participate in physical therapy to learn what he could for walking. Okay. And he wanted to say, well, I understand that most of my day will be spent in the wheelchair, and I'm okay with that. And I've learned how to live my life and get around in my community with my wheelchair, and I'm happy that way. But I would like to see if I can learn how to walk a few steps. So we try to find that balance. Okay. It's not easy. I will not sugarcoat it, guys. I don't sugarcoat things. It is not easy learning how to walk with a prosthesis. And I'm not going to lie, the higher up your amputation, the more challenging it's going to be, the more energy it takes out of you. Okay. So I'm not going to sit here and make any judgment calls on someone who says, yeah, I find it easier to live my life and make throughout my day in a wheelchair. And if that's what gives you quality of life, then we can work with that. Okay. But as a clinician, it's always my job to find out the whys behind it. It's my job to say, okay, is this coming from a place of fear because you're afraid of falling? And in that case, that's something that we can help you with. Is it a fear of failing, that you're afraid you're not going to be able to learn, that you don't have the ability to learn how to use a prosthesis, and that sometimes is a problem as well, and just kind of getting to the root of that problem. So I hope I answered your question with that one. I'd love to hear your thoughts, guys. If there's any of you out there who are using your wheelchair as your primary mode of mobility, how did you come to that decision? How did you get there? And how do you feel about it? So put that in the comment section. Okay, so Donna says, I'll be switching soon to a suction suspension without a sleeve. Okay. Greg says, what about sockets that are very high up on the leg and hip seems to get in the way of certain activities? So if you're talking about the above the knee socket, hang on, I've got a good one right here. We're going to use this one. So in the above the knee socket, Greg, yes, as you can see, this is an example of a right-sided one. So this is the inner thigh, and this would be the outer part of the leg. So yeah, as you can see, it comes up fairly high. And the reason for this is to create the stability in the socket, okay? So the higher up the trend, well, boy, we have a lot of discussions on this show. The higher up some of these trim lines, right, the more stability you're creating for the femur, the thigh bone that goes in here. The lower these trim lines go, okay, the less stability you're going to have. Okay. So the trick of the prosthetist is to create stability without sacrificing comfort and without sacrificing mobility. So, I have a lot of interesting conversations with prosthetists about, how low can you go, right? How low can you put these trim lines before the patient starts to lose the stability within the socket? Okay. But if you put the trim lines up too high, then the comfort level might not always be there. So that's always been that's a tricky one. And again, this is where the skill of an experienced prosthetist who knows how to fit a socket correctly is invaluable. Mm-hmm. Kimberly says, really fizzy, really cold Diet Coke, best thing ever. Amen to that, sister. So good. All right. So, Donna says, looking forward to a better fit in the suction system since I have a neuroma. Ooh. I'm presenting in a test socket with pin suspension and trying to avoid more surgery. Agreed, Donna. When it comes to working with a neuroma, I'm always in favor of saying try the conservative methods first. I have some patients that they have what I call an active neuroma, meaning they know exactly where it is and they know exactly how to push it to get it to start firing off, right? But in many of those cases, they are able to modify the socket design and they're able to find a comfort fit and continue with their activity level. When I got a problem with an neuroma is when it starts interfering with my patient's quality of life and when it starts to impair their function, meaning that no matter what they do to modify that socket, the neuroma still keeps firing off. So Don, I hope in your case that your change in suspension system and suction system will help you with this. But I would encourage you, Donna, tune into next week's show. We are going to be talking about targeted muscle reinnervation and the benefits of that. So keep that one in the back of your head. Okay, so David says, I'm 400 pounds, left below the knee amputee here, and I use my prosthesis, cane, walker, and wheelchair when needed, so it can be done. And yes, I do have many, many patients that they will have a combination, especially with my bilateral folks or my folks who are carrying extra weight. So we'll find different assistive ambulatory devices, whether it's the walker, the cane, or the crutches, depending on what activity they're doing. So a lot of my patients who are inside their home, they either use their wheelchair because they've arranged their home to be able to move their wheelchair, or because it's their home and they're a little more comfortable, they can get away with using just a cane just to get around their home, and then use the walkers or the heavier assistive devices when they go outside of their home. Marianne says, I'm about 50-50 wheelchair and legs. Would like to do more, especially because there are things that I cannot do with my wheelchair. And Marianne is probably the poster child of one of the hardest working viewers that I have. And I have to brag about her a little bit as a bilateral above the knee amputee. She has been working so hard with her physical therapist, and she posts these amazing videos. And I admire her so, so much. And the fact that you are 50-50 wheelchair and legs is wonderful. It's wonderful. It means you're doing both, and I think it's wonderful. So keep working hard, Marianne. Gustavo, sinceramente, no sé. Quiero buscar un poco más de información sobre eso, ¿ok? Por favor, mándeme un email con esa pregunta para que no se me olvide, porque a veces con la mente mía de mamá se me olvidan las cosas. Así que, por favor, mándame un email con esa pregunta y yo le voy a buscar la información. Ashley, I haven't had one of your random questions in a long time, girlfriend. She says, random question. I know everyone is different, but I have my test. I can't read right now. I should have my test socket in 2 weeks. How difficult is it to start walking again after a revision? Good question, Ashley. So for someone like yourself who was so active prior to the revision and you've been so active about keeping yourself in shape, I think for you, it's going to be mainly just kind of maneuvering the edema. So after any surgery, obviously your surgeon has cleared you to walk again, right? You're going to have some leftover inflammation. And when you start more activity, your body's going to have a little bit more of an inflammatory response. So don't be too surprised if you start wearing your leg and all of a sudden your limb starts to kind of get a little swollen, right? It's going to swell and then it'll go back down, then it'll swell and it'll go back down. So it may take, depending on your body, right? It may take a few months for all that swelling to finally resolve. So if you have discomfort, it might be due to the post-op swelling that's going to come and go, okay? But Ashley, I know that you know your body very well. So if you have any pain, like sharp pains or anything that's just unusual, especially with activity, that just kind of warrants a phone call to the doctor there. But as far as the actual mechanics of walking, someone like yourself that you were already very independent, very active before your revision, I wouldn't anticipate that you have any troubles getting back into it. And again, just monitoring the limb volume management and how those changes might happen. Let's see. Donna says, I'll definitely be watching. Yay. My rehab doctor has suggested TMR surgery, but would like to try switching to a suction suspension first. And I'm nervous too about my leg coming off. Donna, I don't blame you. Like I said, I'm not an amputee myself, but I can only imagine putting a leg on for the first time and just praying that it doesn't fall off. So I can totally give you props on that one. And yes, I think you're taking the right steps, Donna. I'm not going to lie, I'm a huge fan of TMR, and I love what I'm reading in the outcome studies and just from talking to surgeons who do that for their patients. But yeah, it is an invasive procedure. It's a surgery, okay? And there's a recovery process. So if you can manage your neuroma with managing the socket and perhaps switching to a different suspension system, and that works, then wonderful. You can avoid surgery. But yes, it's always good, I feel like, just to kind of be aware. Be aware of what your options are out there. So I'm glad you're going to be coming in. Why would you need a revision? Good question, Mark. So, a ver, Gustavo. Gustavo, ahí está mi email. cosi@cositalks.com. Okay. So why would a person need a revision? That's a great question, Mark. So I don't know if Ashley would mind putting the reason why she had it. If not, that's okay too. So a couple of different reasons a person might need a revision. Extra soft tissue. That's when I see a lot when the limb starts to shrink, and perhaps the first amputation surgery, for whatever reason, the surgeon wasn't able to kind of maneuver and manipulate the muscles in quite the right way. And there was a lot of soft tissue at the end that was left there. And it's compromising the fit and stability of the socket, and it's becoming a problem. Okay, a person might opt to have the revision to kind of shave things down a little bit and kind of tighten up the end of that residual limb. Some people, infection. That's usually a really big culprit, that for whatever reason, there's an infection in the limb and either the soft tissue becomes necrotic or a part of the bone becomes necrotic in the case of an osteomyelitis. A neuroma, big one right there. Big one. And again, thankfully, the word about TMR is getting out there in the surgical community, because typically for neuromas, they would just resect it and that's it. But now they're starting to get the word out there about doing the TMR to plug the nerve back into the muscle. And so it won't cause any problems after that. Let's see, other reasons. Pain. Just exploring. Sometimes it might be an exploratory surgery to see what is causing that pain in there, and then the revision comes with it. Let's see. Help me out, guys. Those of you who have had revisions, why have you had revisions done? Let's get those in the comment section. So Ashley says, in my case, the fibula was longer than my tibia, and it was causing issues, and they shaved an inch off my fibula. So here's where Bob's going to come into play. All right. So we have the tibia, your shin bone, and then the fibula. It's a little tiny bone that nobody really pays a whole lot of attention to. It actually only takes 10% of your body weight. So it really doesn't do a whole lot, right? Okay, so in a traditional below the knee amputation, microphone to study, okay, the surgeon sometimes, most of the times, they will cut the fibula just a little bit shorter than the tibia, right? And sometimes it just doesn't happen that way. And that fibula can be a little bit longer, and it can kind of start poking at the end of that residual limb, which is what I imagine might have happened to Ashley. So they may have to trim that bone just a little bit. Another cases, and that kind of reminds me especially for my below the knee oh, good heavens, we're getting to the end of our night because I can't talk anymore. For our below the knee amputees, many of them, there's a lot of atrophy in the muscle, and the tibia becomes extremely prominent and can become troublesome when it comes to the prosthesis and cause a lot of problems with pain. So that might lead to a revision to kind of pull some of the soft tissue over the end of that tibia to provide some padding. Andrea, my resident occupational therapist there, is saying excessive calcification is in the case of heterotopic ossification. Okay, so quick thing on heterotopic ossification, it's basically the formation of bone within the muscle. Okay. And typically we see that with trauma, a lot of when we have traumatic amputations. And then for whatever reason, and this is something, Andrea, maybe you know the answer to this, with traumatic brain injuries. So heterotopic ossification basically happens when there's trauma to a particular region of the body, and then the bone or the body starts producing extra calcium and it calcifies within the muscle, which bone does not belong inside the muscle, right? So you can imagine that causes a lot of issues with pain. Okay, so if there's a diagnosis of heterotopic ossification, one of the options might be to have to surgically go in there and either cut the limb a little bit shorter or remove. And I will say I have to brush up on my HO protocols. Thank you for reminding me of that. Okay, so Steven says, had bone spurs and osteocalcification. There we go. Where the bone grows out from the bone and is trying to turn muscle to bone. So there you go. The heterotopic ossification, Steven. There you go, right there. Okay, so Gustavo is asking, ¿los Estados Unidos las amputaciones bajo la rodilla dejan el peroné o lo eliminan? Ya que ese hueso produce inconvenientes posteriores, tu opinión. Ok, en los Estados Unidos se les deja. Y hay otro procedimiento, Gustavo, que se llama el IRTL. Yo lo voy a escribir aquí se llama IRTL, ¿ok? Y lo que hacen es que cogen la tibia y el peroné y lo juntan con un pedacito de hueso para crear un muñón estable. Okay, so Gustavo was asking if in the United States for our below the knee amputations, do we leave the fibula bone or is it removed? So Gustavo, ¿eso se remueve en Argentina? ¿El peroné se quita en la Argentina o se le deja? So I was just explaining, yes, in the United States, when they do the below the knee amputation, the fibula bone is left there. It's usually shaved a little bit shorter. Sorry, Bob. Or in some cases, like the IRTL procedure, there's a fusion between the tibia and the fibula bone. Fibula. Let's see. Tom says my revision was from scarring from a previous break of my leg. Scar tissue, and that's another one that's what I forgot. Thank you guys for reminding me that if there's excessive scar tissue and it's preventing, it's adhering to the structures underneath, causing skin breakdown, causing problems with prosthetic fit, that's also can be a warrant for a revision where they remove and they excise the scar tissue, as in the case with Donna. There we go. Okay, so Alberis, this is a heavy question. My doctor is recommending me for osseointegration as a below the knee amputee with a total knee replacement, and would like if you can please tell your opinion on osseointegration and total knee replacement. Okay, so this is the part, Alberis, where I can give you a general opinion, but your case is a very unique case, so you'd have to really. I would recommend that you get more than one opinion just to be sure that this is the right path for you, because it is a very intense one. Have I seen patients who have total knee replacements on their below the knee amputation? Yes. And can you have a successful outcome? Yes, as long as you have the physical therapy and the rehab protocols behind it after your surgery. I have not seen yet a combination of osseointegration with total knee replacement. Personally, I have not seen that combination. I have worked with some osseointegration patients, and you're seeing it a lot more in the United States now than even from 2 years ago when we did the show on osseointegration. So Alberis, I did do a show completely on osseointegration. 2 years ago, it would have been, give me a second, November of 2019. Okay, so if you want to go back into my video archives on my Facebook page, you'll find that I did a show, a month worth of shows on osseointegration, November of 2019. Okay, so osseointegration is made for a very particular individual. It is being used a lot for folks who are not able to wear a conventional socket. Okay, whether this is because they have a very, very short residual limb and they are unable to successfully get a socket to suspend from there. in some cases where they have extreme issues with skin, that there is just absolutely no way that they can tolerate wearing a socket on their skin. Okay. It is a very intensive procedure. Okay. So we have two basic ways of osseointegration. We have the OPRA system, which is a two-part. The first part is where they implant the screw within the bone, and then in the second surgery, they create the stoma where the screw comes out. Okay. And then there's the press fit. I am not as familiar with the press fit, but my understanding is that it's a one procedure protocol. Okay. The recovery process from osseointegration is intense. Not going to sugarcoat that one for you guys. Okay. But more importantly, if you are considering osseointegration, okay, you need to have a full team approach. Okay. And this is the part where I put the responsibility in your hands as a patient. It is your responsibility as a patient, okay, to make sure that you get all the information that you can from credible sources on osseointegration, but that you also make sure that whomever is doing your surgery has the full team approach, okay, that you have a case manager, you have physical therapy and occupational therapy that will be following you from day one, okay, that you have a full rehab protocol, okay. Unfortunately, a lot of the programs here in the United States that I've seen, they do, okay. Some of our international programs that were initially doing osseointegration, they did not have good follow-up. Won't name any names, but there was a lot of international programs that did not have good follow-up for their international patients, and those patients did not have good outcomes. Okay. So if you're here in the United States, thankfully we have a lot of surgeons that have good teams. Usually these surgeons are in teaching hospitals, hospitals that have these resources. So if this is something that you're going to be doing, you need to make sure that you have that team around you that knows the protocols for recovery from osseointegration. Okay. And again, educate and empower yourself with that information before making that decision. And, for something big like this, I think it's worth getting two opinions. It's a big decision. It's a big surgery. Okay. Do you have successful outcomes from these surgeries? Yes, you do. Okay. But you want to make sure that you're making the right decision for yourself and with the right surgeon. Yes? Okay. So, Gustavo, sí, en pintura, como decimos en Cuba, en pintura, la unión de esos dos huesos parece muy bonito y suena muy estable, pero sinceramente, y yo tengo que mirar los estudios en esto para ver de verdad los números de cómo sale la solución de esta cirugía, pero he tenido muchas personas que tuvieron esa cirugía y no necesariamente tuvieron mejor función después. Tiene más que ver cómo el cirujano amarra, no sé si lo estoy diciendo bien, amarra esos músculos durante el tiempo de la cirugía y la forma del muñón. Y después cómo la cuenca está suspendida para dar la estabilidad. ¿Sí? Okay. All right, guys, I have talked your ears off. I have talked my ears off this evening. These questions have been amazing. Guys, if I missed your question this evening, I do apologize. Please send me an email and keep nudging me in the ribs until I answer your question. And I promise you, I answer all of my questions that are sent to my email. Or you can tag me on the Facebook support groups if you find that there's a question that you think that I can answer. But guys, next week, TMR Nerve is back on the Cosi Talks show. We have surgeon Dr. Margaret Rabot, who is an amazing plastic surgeon who works with oncology with cancer patients and related amputations. And she's going to be bringing her knowledge. And I know there's a lot of cancer survivors out there who are listening to my show. So I hope you will join me next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Thank you for letting me be a part of your lives this evening, and have a great night.